Welcome to Wednesday Night Live. It's my time with Tom Dienhart, always a good thing for me, but want to thank our sponsors, acrepro.com. When it comes to land sales, it pays to have experts in your corner like Tom Dienhart talking Purdue football. That helps, but AcrePro Midwest Farm Group are your local farmland specialists with decades of experience in Indiana agriculture, and no one knows the market better, whether you're doing that 1031 exchange or simply buying and selling farmland. Your local AcrePro agent will walk the land with you and ensure the deal is done right. And visit acrepro.com or call 765-775-6502. Friend Kyle Spurry will be on the sidelines in Ross H. Stadium this weekend. And he is a local land expert as well. That number again, 765-775-6502. All right, we are now down to 3 weeks left in this season for the Boilermakers. I know it's been a challenging one. I think even from your as much as you do with this, just to keep this relevant and interesting. Unprecedented challenges for Purdue. We know that it's going to be another one this weekend. Purdue will be a 4-touchdown underdog against Penn State. You talk to these guys, Tom, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. They still seem upbeat. How do they look from your perspective?
Yeah, you're right. Plus, it's senior day, Alan.
That's right.
So I think there's I tweeted out the list of guys today and put it on the website too. I want to say roughly maybe 20 guys I think are on that list, and boiling over tomorrow as a tease. I got pretty good intel on who's actually going to be coming back from that group. So just because you're going through senior day doesn't mean you don't have a chance to play next year. Gus Hartwig, for instance, went through senior day last year. Here he is again. So, yeah, senior day, it's always kind of a fun moment, isn't it, for the families? So, yeah, Gus for sure is gone. We know Kydron Jenkins is gone as well, and a few other guys. But, yeah, it's been a tough year, like you said, Alan. The players always seem to be pretty upbeat. We spoke to Gus and KJ today both. And, it hasn't been fun for anybody. Let's be honest. This may be the team in Power 4 football, Alan. And they've got the longest losing streak of any FBS school. Kent State's lost 11. Of course, they're not Power 4. And then there's Purdue with 8 losses in a row. So there you go. Kind of paint another grim picture, another grim detail for you. Yeah, here we are with Penn State, Alan. And, there's another steep hill. Then they go to Michigan State. And they go to Indiana to close the year. So we could be looking at 1-11, my friend.
Yeah, it is. And we do take your questions today. And so certainly do that. And you're right, Tom. That's just nothing fun about that. No question. And when you look at that, the way that this season's gone, it's tough on everybody. Your coach comes in every week to the press conference. You talk to him. You talk to the players. They try to stay upbeat. They don't want to lose, but certainly that you see this. You've covered the highs and the lows. I don't know how many in your time here, you haven't had a one-win season, to say the least, though I know you've been around Purdue in 1993, or at least paying attention to Purdue in 1993, and, of course, 2013 as well.
Yeah, I was at a lot of those games in 93. Jim Coletto, his third year, 1-11. I think they beat Western Michigan. They had some close games that year, Alan.
Yeah, they did. They were much more competitive than the 13 and 24 teams had been.
You know what helped that year, Alan, was the big dogs' junior year in basketball. So jacked up. That 93-94 school year turned out to be a good one for students. But, yeah, Alan, they're still going to host a lot of visitors this weekend. The numbers upwards of 40 kids are going to be here on visits. Mostly, they're unofficial. They have one official visit, a kid coming in, offensive lineman. So they're still chipping away, Alan. I was told today one of their commitments, though, is going to be taking an OV this weekend to Iowa State. They've already lost 4 kids from that 2025 class, and there's another kid taking an OV somewhere else at Iowa State. So I've got details of that on the site. And, yeah, Alan, every week we have to talk about what's next for Purdue. We read the message board. You talk to fans. What's going to happen to Ryan Walters? We all want to know. I tell you what, buddy, the more people I talk to, the more I think he's going to be back. I think he's going to be back, and with a very heavily revised staff, maybe with as many as all new assistant coaches, if you can believe that, 10 new coaches. We'll see if that does transpire, how much change takes place on that staff. But again, right now, if you back me into the corner and ask me, will Ryan Walters be back in 2025? My answer would be yes. I think it's leaning that way, Al. It's very much trending that way. So we'll see how this unfolds. Crunch time's coming up here. It's November. We know there's 3 games left. When will there be some announcement, one way or the other, going into the IU game, coming out of it? Who knows? But again, I think that's sort of where things stand right now, Al. Now I'm going to detail some of that and boiling over tomorrow too. The tenor of the times, I think, plays a lot into this what would be this call to keep him for another year, and it always gets back to money. And so yeah, it's tough. And you've been around Purdue longer than me. You know, Purdue's very pragmatic, very methodical, like all big bureaucracies that move slowly and with great purpose. And they never typically fire anybody after 2 years, especially someone who they made an investment in, like a football coach.
Yeah, it isn't as easy as it may sound. I mean, there are, if you get to, people want to think, well, just get rid of him and pay the $11 million bucks. But that is interesting. You talk about the fact that that's where athletic directors and board of trustees and college presidents have to make tough decisions that may not sit in the fans with some of the fans, and I guess the fans can vote with their pocketbooks if they choose, and that will happen in some level I would think. But that's the thing, and we're never flippant about this. Of course, it's nobody's happy to be having this discussions or thought process. It's out there. There's no question about that, and that's the thing where you'd be sticking your head in the sand. Especially in today's times. I mean, there's a sense of urgency, and then you've got your rival down 100 miles down due south, basically Lafayette, that's looking at a college football playoff and then made a change last year. It's not as easy as it looks there either, but the Hoosiers obviously have had a great year, and that doesn't sit well with the fan base as well. All right, we do have some questions. I got a question here. Jim Garfinkel, always nice to join in. Offensive line has been better than average for the run, but putrid, his words, for the pass. Why? Speed, lack of fundamentals. What do you see, Tom, in terms of what that's been? Because it seemed to me they really were pretty gung-ho on this O-line as things emerged into the 2024 season. But what do you see from that?
Yeah, he's right. They've been pretty good run blocking. They were good last year too, Alan.
Yeah.
Number 1 in the Big Ten, in Big Ten games last year in rushing, if you can believe that. In the run game, we've seen that's been the one thing they've been able to sort of hang their hat on a fairly regular basis this year. But the pass blocking, just the pass game overall, I think it's a couple things. I think it's a pretty athletic line, Alan. I think a lot of the pass issues, and there have been busts up front, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of those can be. You got to look at the wide receiving core, Alan. I think there's been a real inability to get open. In that unit, it's been very disappointing. The wide receivers have no game breakers. It seems like nobody ever catches the ball in stride. There's so few big plays. I think that's an issue. I think Hudson Card at times can be indecisive. I think at times he can hold the ball. I kind of wonder how quickly he can process things sometimes. If he overthinks things, holds the ball too long, I think we all can agree that happens as well. So I think those have been some contributing factors to why the pass game has really struggled. Yeah, it's been a real sore spot to see a school like Purdue, which really, as we all know, has hung its hat on throwing the football. And you see how they've really struggled to do that this year, even really for 2 years, Alan.
Yeah, it has been that way, and Hudson Card has been here with seemingly always under some level of duress. Quarterbacks are.
Okay, Alan, real quick trivia question for you. How many times do you think he's thrown for 300 yards at Purdue?
The answer is either 0 or 1.
One time.
Yeah, one time. That was Minnesota.
Against Syracuse last year over here.
Syracuse, that's right, and early on. And he had some good games down the stretch with Minnesota and Indiana. He was really pretty good numbers-wise, but that's right.
Not that that's the ultimate bellwether, but 300 yards. I mean, it's kind of – I'm always kind of blown away. He's only had one 300-yard passing game at Purdue.
And that's the thing. You got to get easy yards, and easy is not mean by passing, but this whole program has been predicated on that, really, to be honest, and that's been a tough thing. I think that's one of the toughest things for the fan base too. It's not the fact that you're losing games. We go back to that 93 season, Purdue 1-11, but they were competitive. They were competitive up at Michigan even. They had a chance to beat Indiana, who was with I think Mark Hagan, who was still playing there at that time, or maybe not. I think he may have been passed. But my point is, had a chance to win that game in Bloomington. This is a team that it's just been very, very frustrating, because I suppose when you had Mike Allstott running around, that was his first year where he really got to carry the ball a lot. That had that competitive nature. And Devin Mockabee certainly has filled that bill, not to the level that Allstott maybe has, but he has been a guy that you can hang your hat on with respect to effort. Penn State will bring, the Nittany Lions are certainly in the playoff hunt, to say the least. They have a lot of reasons to shake off the Ohio State loss, which they did by beating Washington, but also, the need for some style points. We kind of keep that's a fundamental thing we keep talking about. Even Ohio State last week, may have taken its foot off the gas, but they got the gas revved up enough to get to 45 points. Now, again, Purdue gave them 2 touchdowns. We get that, but my point is that it's tough when you're struggling and you can't line up against a team that you're reasonably got a chance to beat. That makes it really tough on getting morale and hoping for improvement.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you're really reaching for things that you can take with the positives this year for Purdue, and this Penn State team is pretty good, Alan. It's one of James Frank's better teams. I know they failed their big test a couple of weeks ago. They had the Buckeyes at home and got beat. Real good defense, Alan, but their offense, they got the new coordinator from Kansas, Andy Koltanicki, and they didn't score offensive touchdown against Ohio State. So their fans were, of course, up in arms. And they finished at Minnesota, and they play Maryland, I believe, is their last game of the year. Their resume is not real impressive, to be honest with you. The best win's probably at Wisconsin, but and then they still may get in here, Alan. So we'll see. They know they can't sleepwalk. Remember last time they were here to kick off 2022 season. That was a fun game. Purdue could have won that game. I think it was like 35-31. I want to say a Thursday or a Friday. So
to open the season, right?
Open the season. So but with Purdue, it's been a real slog, Alan. And real quick, back to some of the economics. Revenue sharing starts next year. We all know that schools are going to be on the hook for $22 million to pay these student athletes. That's a big bill, Alan. And schools, I don't think, want to pay these big buyouts to head coaches. As you said, for Purdue, it would be over $10 million to step away from Ryan Walters. We've already seen Florida State make this move, Alan. Mike Norvell has a huge buyout. They weren't going to pay it down at FSU, so they've already fired both of his coordinators and coach. We've seen Oklahoma fire its offensive coordinator. Central Florida fired its defensive coordinator. My point being, Alan, they don't anticipate a lot of head coaches getting canned this year because of this revenue sharing that's coming. What's going to happen is a lot of coordinators are going to get fired, and obviously there's not as much of an economic impact making staff changes, and I believe that's going to be at the works at Purdue too. They're going to keep the head coach and change the staff, and that can work. But you again, it's always a delicate balancing act when you're bringing in a lot of new voices. Will the staff work well together? How's your roster going to be impacted with portal departures? On and on it goes. But man, if you're Purdue, you got to do something. You have to try something.
Yeah, you got to do the calculation too. Of what you may lose in season ticket sales, which we know that will happen in some fashion. But yeah, not an easy time for Mike Babinski, and I get that. And there's when things don't work out, the athletic director gets heat as well, and he's had his share of that too. I mean, there's without question. I mean, he's been there before. That's the one good thing. He's dealt with that in his days at certainly at Georgia Tech and obviously here at Purdue. Of course, he was at Xavier before that. They don't play football, but that is a situation where you gotta figure that one out, and that's what's going to be interesting to see what happens from that standpoint. Do you sense if you do make a change in staff, if it were you, and that's an unfair question, do Do you try to find a blend of guys? It's got to be tough if you do that.
Mhm.
That right now you got to think. This whole coaching staff is on double secret probation, so to speak, when you have a 1-11 season
Yeah.
on the heels of a 4-8 season. Does that make it a lot tougher to get guys in your view, or how does that, is that pool out there still of guys that'd be willing to maybe move up from almost like a Jason Simmons type situation where you come up from go from a smaller situation to here quickly? How do you see that shaking out?
Yeah, it does. From the outside looking in, you'd say to yourself, why would I want to join this potentially sinking ship, right?
Yeah.
Why would I want to hitch my wagon to what could be a losing proposition in 2025? But just from some of the people I've reached out to, I don't think they'll have any trouble building staff, even though it looks like it's a huge steep hill to climb, and the odds may be long. But I still think there's plenty of guys that have good resumes that they could get here, Alan. They may have to overpay a little bit. I'm not sure if they may have to give 2-year contracts, but that's for down the road. But right now, I think there's some very very qualified individuals. I think the idea is for Ryan to step back and be a true head coach, Alan, to relinquish any day-to-day coordinator duties on either side of the ball, to divorce himself from the X's and O's, the minutia of the X's and O's, and to be a true head coach, right? And to devote his full skills to the entire squad, and then have some veteran seasoned coordinators, offense and defense. And Alan, maybe you even bring in, as we've seen other schools do, a sage former head coach just as an advisor or as an analyst, as a sounding board. I tell you what, a good guy, I think a good guy would be Dan Hawkins, former Colorado coach who coached Ryan Walters at Boulder, was head coach at Boise State, was head coach at CU, was head coach recently at UC Davis, coached in the CFL. Guy like that, Ryan knows and has been a proven successful head coach for multiple years. Vanderbilt's got Jerry Kill. Gary Patterson was at Texas. There's these guys, you sort of forget about them until people bring them up. Oh, I didn't know that guy was on that person's staff. But it'd be a nice safety blanket. So maybe they would try to bring somebody of that ilk in too, to serve, like I said, as an analyst or as an advisor, just to help on game day, to help with whatever decision-making time as well. So big stakes here. There's a lot of money, Alan, and these schools spend a lot of money to win football games, and Purdue's in the big time here, man. And you got to match the resources that these other schools are devoting to.
Well, it's interesting too. Ryan Walters talked about that when asked about the things he's learned, and I thought a lot of those answers, and I'm not being critical, I'm just being what I heard, were things that a young coach with lack of experience, and it's different too. You're a young coach with not much, not head coaching experience, but you're also dealing in a tumultuous situation. It wasn't that much last year, but 4-8 was a disappointment, and now 1-11 is a colossal disappointment, and that is a very hard thing for a young coach, and that's where good mentoring. And I'm not saying he doesn't have that, but I do think on the surface, a little more age in the room or experience in the room, because it's impossible for a guy like Ryan Walters to really know how this feels, because he's never been a head coach where, and I understand fans don't want to hear this, but the deal is when you're 1-11, that's tough. And yes, you may have brought it on yourself. I get it. You're the head man. You're responsible, but this is it's a really hard thing to manage, especially when you're 38 years old and haven't been through anything like that.
Yeah, it's hard to say there's a good 1-11 and a bad 1-11, right?
Yeah.
This is
There's not much good. I'll give you that.
This is a really bad 1-11.
Yeah.
I think they had the 2 overtime losses. They could have won at Illinois, 50-49, and of course Northwestern a couple of weeks ago over here, 26-20. Very much winnable games. Nebraska's not very good. They could have beat Nebraska over here. Oregon State's got a losing record. Oregon State's not any good. They just got beat by San Jose State, I think, at home. So there were winnable games on here. And if you're pretty confident, you could have probably gone up to East Lansing and made a run at that team too up there. So And then there were games on here, and too often we saw Purdue just not look competitive. And I
Yeah.
tell you what, the first bucket of cold water, of course, was that Notre Dame game. 2 weeks to prepare. I mean, just stupefied, stunned. 42 to nothing at halftime. I mean, unreal football, and I never thought I'd see. And then a couple weeks later, Madison, Wisconsin, 52 to 6 against a Wisconsin team that I think is 5-4 right now. So though those games really stick out, and that Wisconsin game, on the heels of the Nebraska loss at home when Graham Harrell got fired. So it's been a weird year, right, on a lot of different fronts. But yeah, the first obviously giant alarm bell was that Notre Dame game, and that proved unfortunately to be a real portent of things to come, Alan.
Yeah, no question. I want to get your take on the college football playoff, because obviously Indiana now I think is 5th. Mm-hmm. And I've been under this notion, and maybe you know more about this by leaps and bounds than I do. It just seems interesting that I've been kind of in my own head thinking, and I'm not spending a lot of time thinking about Indiana football, but it's hard to ignore the kind of year they've had, the Hoosiers have had. I mean, Kurt Cignetti and company have been pretty fabulous in terms of how the Hoosiers have been, and here they are on the cusp of it. But do you look at the landscape and say 4 Big Ten teams? If Indiana loses to Ohio State and let's say they get beat 35-17, so it's not even all that close, but they only lose one game in the regular season, and Penn State runs the table and finishes 11-1. Do you see 4 Big Ten teams in that playoff, or is it still really dependent on how everything else shakes out?
I don't see 4 Big Ten teams now, Alan. I don't. Not. I mean, I'm not obviously an IU fan, but even if they're 11-1 in that loss at Ohio State, there's no meat on their resume. And
but is there more meat than Penn State?
I'm just going to say that. And there's not a lot on Penn State. I talked about them a little bit earlier. Best win being at Wisconsin. And for Indiana, their best win, they won at UCLA early in the year. But I'm hard pressed.
That's starting to look better now.
Yeah, it is. Yes. I mean, that's turned out to be a nice win out there. But clobbering Nebraska at home, but neither team has a super impressive resume. I saw some tweets today, and these SEC teams like Ole Miss and Tennessee, a few that are ranked behind them, I think most of us would agree if they played these Big Ten teams, Penn State and Indiana, they'd probably be a favorite on neutral field. So I don't see 4 Big Ten teams in. I think a third one could sneak in, and even if Penn State's resume isn't that good, I think they probably would get the nod over IU. But again, you can make a case for both those teams not getting in, to be honest with you, Alan.
Yeah, it's a tough one in terms of that, and trying to figure out which somebody may get left with an 11-1 record, and then you got Georgia sitting out there that might not make it. And they've played there, and one would at least pass in the eyeball test between Georgia versus Indiana and Georgia versus Penn State. That doesn't look favorable for those two schools.
Georgia, Tennessee was 7, Alabama's 10, Ole Miss is 11, Georgia's 12. You really think Penn State and Indiana are better than any of those 4 teams?
Yeah, no. The answer is no. I don't. And that's what I'm saying. I think they keep talking about the fact that
neither's Texas. Texas is that. I was Texas that. Not any good.
Yeah, so it is really an interesting deal that we'll be watching maybe from afar here in the last couple of weeks, but or at a distance, but we'll be doing it. All right, Tom. Well, thank you as always for your insight, and Wednesday Night Live, another edition as we inch our way towards the end of this football season. But we appreciate that as well. We want to thank Kyle Spray and the good folks at Acre Pro. Visit acrepro.com at 765-775-6502. That number again, 775-6502, the area code 765. If you're doing that 1031 exchange, we're all sometime in my life I'd like to do one, but I got to buy some land to do that. But we appreciate Kyle Spray and that group as well. Tom, have a great rest of your week. We'll have more. Of course, we'll have our pregame show Golden Black Radio for Saturday, and we'll be putting that to bed soon. And then also Saturday simulcast. Join us for that after that Purdue Penn State game. Mike Carmen, Brian Newbert, Tom Dienhart will shed some wisdom on something, probably Purdue football, and that'll be great as well. So, all right, Tom, have a great one. Thanks so much. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We appreciate that, and we'll see you next week on Wednesday Night Live. All right, I think we're finally off. Hey, thank you.